Welcome into the Madhouse. You're listening to Sports Madness. I'm your host, David Vaughn, live on the Sports Madness Network. I want to thank you all for joining us today on this inaugural podcast of Sports Madness. Today, we're going to be covering the college football playoff semifinal, and we're going to be talking about the NFL wildcard round. We're going to talk about first the college football playoff games. You have the Orange Bowl featuring Notre Dame and Penn State. And then you have the Cotton Bowl featuring Texas and Ohio State. There are issues kind of surrounding both games. The first thing that you want to talk about is kind of take it from the sports setting and kind of put that off to the side for a little bit. The first thing is that everyone's going to be on super heightened alert security-wise because of everything that went down with the Sugar Bowl last week down in New Orleans. And so security is going to be really heightened. Everyone's going to kind of be on this high alert. It's going to be a little bit outside of the stadium. It's going to kind of be like a kind of a high tension setting until you get into the stadium. Then everything should be just fine. Again, we'll start with the Orange Bowl. You've got Notre Dame versus Penn State. Penn State ranked number 6. Notre Dame ranked number 7. Penn State 13-2 out of the Big Ten. They lost in the Big Ten championship game, 45-37 to Oregon, in a game that ended up being a lot closer than people anticipated. Their only other loss was to Ohio State, who's also one of the Final Four teams remaining in the playoff. Penn State's path to get here, a lot of people argue it was the easiest of any of the teams in the college football playoff. They beat SMU in the first round, 38-10, a game that they hosted. And then they defeated Boise State 31-14, in a game that was closer than that score would indicate. Penn State did kind of jump out big, but Boise State came to play, and they acquitted themselves well in the second half of that one. Coach Franklin has his guys ready to go, and he's got them. They're a pretty well-oiled machine at this point. Notre Dame coming into the game 13-1. Remember, a lot of people wrote Notre Dame off at the beginning of the year. They had that season-opening loss to Northern Illinois. Actually, it wasn't their season opener. It was their second game of the year because they defeated A&M the week before. But they lost at home to Northern Illinois, 16-14. In that game, that kind of everyone circled and be like, well, Notre Dame is done. Well, and all they've done now is just win the last 12 straight. They won their first round matchup. They hosted Indiana. They beat them 27-17. In a game again that Indiana acquitted themselves well as well. And then kind of shocking the world in the quarterfinal, they defeated Georgia 23-10 in a game that really wasn't as close as the score indicates. Georgia just kind of seemed outmatched the entire time. Of course, Georgia, was on a backup quarterback, and you hear all the excuses, you hear all the reasons, but the fact is you still got to play the game on the 100 yards by 53 yards, and Notre Dame played it better. Notre Dame is looking terrific. They're one of the best-looking teams right now in the playoff. Of course, when you're down to 4, they all look pretty decent. The line is Notre Dame by 1. Over-under is 44.5. I think it's going to go over. I think we're going to have maybe not an offensive shootout. Like, I don't think it's going to be a 41-38 game by any means. But I do think that that the offenses are going to show up. I think that it's going to be a fun game to watch. I think it's actually going to be the more entertaining of the two games. I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be back and forth. Wouldn't surprise me at all if it ended up going to overtime. Penn State kind of has the reputation. Well, you actually have two teams here that are kind of fighting the same reputation. Current reputation. Both of these teams are what you would consider blue bloods. They've both had past success. They've both won national championships before, but not recently. And both of these teams kind of have a reputation for getting to this point of the season and choking everything away. And so it's going to be better to see which team has the better mental mindset coming in. Like which one is able to overcome more quickly. It's going to be, I mean, the weather's going to be great. It's going to be down in Miami. It's going to be fantastic weather. The teams have been down there. Presumably, they've gotten acclimated to it. The two coaches have their guys ready to go. These are not teams that you're going to worry about discipline issues, uh, either on or off the field. Um, and when it comes down to it, it's just going to be some tough, hard-nosed football. I personally, I think Penn State wins this game. I think they're a little bit better team. Uh, Having said that, I mean, the line's about right. In college football, when you have a 1-point line, it's essentially a pick 'em. And I think you really could go either way. I think either team could win this, and I think it's going to be a very entertaining game to watch. Like I said, I think it's going to be the more entertaining of the two of bowl games. That game is tonight at 6:30, and I'm excited to watch it. I think I think that you have both these teams that are really really just kind of bringing a lot to the table. I think that you have Leonard, the quarterback for Notre Dame, just under 2,400 passing yards. He has 18 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. You have Alar, the quarterback for Penn State, has thrown for 3,200 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 7 picks. Of course, you have a pair of phenomenal running backs as well. Running backs for both teams have rushed over 1,000 yards this season. Love for Notre Dame has 1,076 yards and 16 touchdowns. Allen for Penn State has 1,026 yards and 8 touchdowns. Love's average is unbelievable. It's almost 9 yards a carry over the course of an entire season. Whichever team's defensive line steps up is the one that's going to win this game. And that's what it's going to come down to. Is this game's, even though I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, it's going to be one in the trenches. Whichever one can protect the quarterback, create the holes, that's going to make the big difference. For me, the X factor and the reason I think that Penn State is going to win is because I think they're better on the receiving end. You've got Warren that has almost 1,200 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns on the year. Averaging 12 yards a catch on the season. I think, I just don't know that Notre Dame's secondary is going to be able to keep up with him. Again, I don't by any means think it's going to be a blowout. I don't think it's going to be a rout. I don't think it's going to be anything of the sort, other than I think it's just going to be a good, fun football game. It's not necessarily going to be what I would say would be a like a typical, what you would imagine a Big Ten game being. It's going to be, I think, a little more loose, a little more free flowing. In the Cotton Bowl, you've got Ohio State versus Texas. Ohio State coming as a 5-point favorite, a little bit bigger. They're going to have issues as well. On top of security, they're having absolutely miserable weather in the Metroplex. They're expecting snow and ice. So it's going to be, it's going to be difficult. But once you get inside, it's a domed stadium. Jerry World is a great facility. They're going to have the roof closed, presumably. Boy, wouldn't that be something? You put them out there and then say, you know what, it's 25 degrees and snowing. We'll open the roof, let it go. Great football weather. Don't get me wrong. Excellent football weather. Maybe not what we're going for here. Texas comes in as the 5 seed at 13-2 on the year out of the SEC. Ohio State 12-2 out of the Big Ten. The over/under on this one's 53.5. And the line is now 6. It was 5 earlier. It's a 6-point spread now, favor Ohio State. Guys, I don't know that this is going to be much of a game. I really don't. I think Ohio State just has too much. Texas has been too inconsistent. Now, and their path to get here, Texas beat Clemson in the first round, 38-24 down in Austin. And then they had that unbelievable game against Arizona State last week, 39-31, double overtime, a tremendous game, and one that I think a lot of people weren't expecting. Texas was just supposed to roll all over Arizona State, and they did not. Texas' 2 losses both come to Georgia, who's now out of the playoff, thanks to Notre Dame. On the flip side, you have Ohio State coming in 12-2 on the year. They've had, in my opinion, the most difficult road to get to the semifinal. They defeated Tennessee handily, 42-17. Tennessee was a good squad, and Ohio State made them look like a bunch of chumps. And then they blew the doors off of Oregon, 41-21, in a game that wasn't even that close. That game was never in doubt, and a lot of people, myself included, really didn't give Ohio State much more than a puncher's chance in that game. And boy, did they come out swinging! They just absolutely took care of business. Ohio State's 2 losses were to Oregon, that 1-point loss in Eugene, and then inexplicably losing to a pretty bad, by their standard, Michigan team, 13-10. But their 2 losses came by a combined 4 points, and one of them was a rivalry game. So you really can't judge just too harshly on that. But if you look at the matchup, Texas coming in shorthanded. Ewers has been inconsistent. It's one of those things where it's kind of a perfect storm. Ohio State is absolutely rolling, and Texas is kind of struggling a little bit. If you look at things, Ewers comes in just under 3,200 yards passing on the season. Good year, 29 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, but he's kind of been off his game a little bit. Texas running back Wisner has just over 1,000 yards on the season. I think 1,018, 1,020, something like that. 5 touchdowns, and then Golden, their leading receiver, 936 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns on the year. Howard for Ohio State, incredible year, just under 3,500 passing yards, 32 touchdowns to 9 interceptions on the season. Henderson, just under 1,000 yards, rushing 925 yards and 10 touchdowns on the year. And then Smith, 1,024 yards, 14 touchdowns on the year. I look at this game, and a lot of people are giving Texas the nod, but I think they're giving Texas the nod because of the SEC logo and not necessarily because of the product that's being put out on the field, especially recently. They struggled against Kentucky. They struggled against A&M. They lost to Georgia, which, again, no shame in that. They didn't convincingly beat Clemson, and they didn't convincingly beat Arizona State. And then you look on the other side, and you've got Ohio State that in their last 5, they blew out Northwestern. They blew out Indiana. They lost at home to Michigan, again, a rivalry game by 3 points. And then they blew out Tennessee in the playoff, and they blew out Oregon in the playoff. You look at it, you look at what's being put out on the field right now. I think Ohio State wins this game, and I think they win it going away. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this turned into, because Ohio State's out to prove a point right now. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this ended up being like a 49-17 game, 56 even maybe for Ohio State, because if they can figure out a way to neutralize Texas's defensive line, this shut the book. This game's over before it ever starts. That's a big if, because Texas' defensive line is very good. They're very good at stopping the run, and Cam Scadaboo ran all over them. Now, Cam Scadaboo is an exception. He should have, by all rights, been in New York for the Heisman ceremony. One could easily make a case that he should have won it. He had a phenomenal season. He's a phenomenal talent, great running back. I just don't see this being much of a competitive game. I don't. I think Ohio State wins this. I think they win it going away. I think they're going to win fairly convincingly. And then that would set up a really interesting potential Big Ten rematch between Ohio State and Penn State for the national championship. If things work out that way. And that game is tomorrow at 6:30 Central Time, by the way. So, I'm excited for both of these games. I'm excited to see what happens. I hope that Ohio State-Texas game is competitive. I just don't think it's going to be personally. Moving on to the NFL wild card. Tis the season for things to go crazy. We'll talk about first the AFC. You've got 3 matchups this weekend. You have the LA Chargers versus Houston. Pittsburgh versus Baltimore, and Denver versus Buffalo. We'll start with the Chargers versus Houston, and they're one of two teams that are directly impacted by these fires that are going on in Los Angeles. If you're not aware, um, uh, turn on CNN or Fox News. They're having unbelievable wildfires out in the Los Angeles area. People are being evacuated. People are being killed, unfortunately, losing everything that they've ever had. Um, in the middle of that, oh, by the way, let's go play a football game. Somehow it all just seems trivial. You have the Chargers coming in 11-6 out of the AFC West. Houston 10-7 out of the AFC South. Houston won the AFC South. They're coming into this game really banged up. Tank Dell is out. They just haven't looked good their last few weeks. The Chargers come in 2.5-point favorites. If into this game, I think the distractions at home are going to be too much. I think Houston's going to win this game. I think all things being equal and perfect circumstances, and there are no fires, and players aren't worried about their family's well-being, I think San Diego wins, maybe even fairly convincingly. I just don't know how. Yes, these guys are professionals. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know how they leave their families behind in that situation, go to Houston, play a football game, and have any kind of mindset. You know, I would be highly surprised. I'd be highly surprised. I think that Houston's going to win this game, and it may end up even kind of being a situation like last year where Houston beat Cleveland and they beat them like very very convincingly. I could see it kind of being that way. You know, Justin Herbert, uh, 3,800, almost 3,900 passing yards, 23 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions on the season. Unbelievable control, great accuracy. J.K. Dobbins, the running back, 905 yards, averaging 5 yards a carry over the course of the season, 9 touchdowns. And then you have McConkey with almost 1,200 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns on the year. For Houston, you have C.J. Stroud, 3,700 yards, just over 3,700 yards passing. 20 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. He is not as accurate as he was last year. He's not as good, frankly, this year as he was last year. Um, and a lot of that's because his offensive line is not giving him any time at all. And that was the one thing that was addressed, that was kind of brought up as a concern in the offseason, was Houston needed to do something about their offensive line, and they never did. Well, now it's kind of coming back to bite them a little bit. And Houston comes into this game cold. They lost to Kansas City. They looked terrible against Baltimore. They didn't look good against Tennessee, even though they won that one. The Chargers are hot coming in right now. They're playing good football. They beat Denver. They blew out New England, which you should do, and then they handled Las Vegas fairly convincingly. All signs on paper indicate to the Chargers winning this game and winning it convincingly. When you take the X factor into account, I just don't think that the Chargers are going to be able to overcome what's going on at home. And this is not a situation where it's like, oh, just get over it. It's a situation at home. You're talking livelihood. You're talking your family's safety and security. You're talking, your home. This is different. This is a different situation. And I think it's going to be too much for the Chargers to overcome. I think the Texans win this game, and it wouldn't surprise me if Houston won big. This kind of reminds me a little bit of a few years ago when the Chicago Cubs played the Houston Astros, just as Hurricane Harvey, maybe, I don't remember which one it was hitting Houston. And the game was supposed to be in Houston, but they ended up moving it to Milwaukee. And Houston was by far the better team. But the Cubs came in and threw a perfect game. just because their mind, the Astros' minds weren't in it. I can see it being that kind of situation here. That game is 3:30 on Saturday. You can watch that one on CBS. Saturday at 7 Central on Prime Video. You have Pittsburgh versus Baltimore. Baltimore comes in a massive, almost a 10-point favorite, and it's a 9.5-point favorite. And you look at it on paper. Excuse me as I hydrate. It's cherry Coke, nothing nefarious. Don't worry about it. But you look at it again on paper. Baltimore should win this game big. You've got Lamar Jackson, 4,200 passing yards, 41 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Unbelievable. And that's kind of been the knock on Lamar Jackson. The passes that he's not terribly accurate. You throw 41 touchdowns to 4 picks, you're accurate. You've overcome your accuracy issues. 4,200 passing yards. Derrick Henry just short of 2,000 rushing yards on the season. 16 touchdowns. Baltimore's without their lead receiver, though. Flowers is out. That's a 1,000-yard receiver that's not there. Jackson's primary weapon is not going to be in this game. Now they have plenty of other weapons, and if they want to play small ball, they can Andrews you to death. Because I don't think anyone can stop him. I think that he's the best tight end in the league right now. With all respect to Travis Kelce. For Pittsburgh, you've got Russell Wilson, kind of a renaissance year for him. 2,500 passing yards, not overly impressive. 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Wilson did a good job at managing this team. You've got the running back, Najee Harris, over 1,000 yards on the season, 6 touchdowns. And then you've got Pickens, 900 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year. Pittsburgh seems to be peaking at the right time, though. They're I say they're peaking at the right time. They're not. They lost their last 4. So they do kind of limp into the field, but I don't know necessarily that I'm trusting that. They had a brutal schedule to end the season. Their last 4 games were at Philly, at Baltimore, against the Chiefs, and then against Cincinnati. That's a brutal way to end the season. They went 0 for 4 in those games, but I think that they've shown me enough that they'll be competitive in this game. Baltimore comes in actually on a 4-game winning streak, but they've not played near the competition. They played the Giants. They were at the Giants, against Pittsburgh, at Houston, and against the Browns. And they won all 4 of those games fairly convincingly. But it was the Giants, Pittsburgh, Houston, and Cleveland. It's not the same level of competition. On paper, Baltimore wins. Initially, I had Pittsburgh pulling the upset on here. I'm not so sure anymore. With Baltimore not being healthy coming in, it does make it interesting. The question is, do they have the weapons? You've got Zay Flowers, who's out. You have Justice Hill, who is probably not going to play. You have Deontay Hardy, who's on the injured reserve. And then you've got their 2 cornerbacks, Jalen Armour-Davis and Arthur Mullet, who are on the injured reserve as well. For Pittsburgh, you've got Cam Hayward, who's questionable. You've got Chris Boswell, who's questionable. You've got Nicole Pruitt, who's questionable. And then you have Roman Wilson and Logan Lee, who are out. I just think that the losses that Baltimore has are bigger than the losses that Pittsburgh has, with the exception of Cam Hayward. Cameron Hayward can, he can change a game by himself. I don't know. My initial thought is to say that Baltimore wins this game, and I probably will go with Baltimore to win the game. Uh, but I think I think Pittsburgh makes it close, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Steelers won. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Steelers won. The last game in the AFC is Denver versus Buffalo, and that game is on Sunday on CBS, noon kickoff Central Time. Buffalo comes in a major favorite, 8.5 points. Buffalo's going to win this game. They're 13-4 on the season. They've not lost at home this year. They're not going to start now. Plus, I think the weather's supposed to be kind of suspect for this game as well. Denver 10-7 on the year, and Denver's overachieved. They have. Make no mistake about it. They've overachieved this year. 10-7 on the year. Bo Nix has proven that he belongs in this league. Almost 3,800 passing yards, 29 touchdowns to 12 picks. You've got Williams with 513 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns to lead them. And then you have rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. And then you have Sutton, 1,100 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. Buffalo, it starts and ends with Josh Allen. Josh Allen's had some accuracy issues here recently, though. He's got to get that squared away. If he doesn't, Denver could make this into a game. Allen, 3,700 passing yards, 28 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Cook with over 1,000 receiving yards, 16 touchdowns. Over 1,000 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. You have Shakir, 820 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns on the year. Bills lost their season finale 23-16 to New England. I wouldn't read too much into that. Because if you go the other way, the Broncos beat Kansas City 38-0 in their season finale. I wouldn't look too much into that stuff. I think Buffalo wins this game. I think they win it fairly convincingly, and the worse the weather, the better the Bills' chances. And I think the Bills have a pretty solid chance anyway. I think Buffalo's going to win the game, and I think they'll win it fairly convincingly. On the NFC side, you've got Green Bay versus Philadelphia. And that should be a really fun game. That's going to be on Sunday, 3:30 kickoff Central Time here on, or not here, but on Fox. The Eagles enter the game 4.5-point favorite. Both quarterbacks are questionable for this game. And so if either one of these guys are not able to go, that changes everything completely. You've got the Packers led by Jordan Love, 3,400 passing yards, 25 touchdowns to 11 picks on the year. You've got Jacobs just having a phenomenal season, 1,330 yards, 15 touchdowns on the year, averaging almost 5 yards a carry over the course of the year. And then you have Reed leading them on the receiving end, 857 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts for Philadelphia is not asked to do as much, and so his stats aren't quite as gaudy, but still 2,900 passing yards on the season, 18 touchdowns to 5 picks. Solid numbers. Saquon Barkley, 2,005 yards, came just short of catching Eric Dickerson. And when you start getting into Eric Dickerson, Barry Sanders category, you're doing well for yourself. A.J. Brown, 1,100 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. He is questionable for the game. I think Philadelphia wins the game. Philadelphia 14-3 on the year. Green Bay 11-6. I think Philadelphia wins the game, but if Hurts can't go or if Brown can't go, switch that the other way. Green Bay's focus obviously is going to be on stopping Saquon Barkley first and foremost, because Hurts hasn't really proven that he can beat you with his arm. Not consistently anyway. And so I think, Easier said than done. Oh, just stop Saquon Barkley. Yeah, 130 yards a game. That's easier said than done. But yeah, I think Green Bay's key is going to be to try and stack the box and just kind of make Philly beat you with on the arm of Hurts. Next game we're going to talk about is Washington versus Tampa Bay. And this one is an interesting one. This is fun. Tampa Bay comes in as the favorite in this game. Tampa's 10-7 on the year. AFC South champs. Washington's 12-5, and they overachieved like crazy this year. I don't know that anyone thought that Washington was going to be not only a playoff team but a comfortable playoff team. I don't know that anyone necessarily thought that. Baker Mayfield had an unbelievable year for Tampa Bay. 4,500 passing yards, 41 touchdowns to 16 picks. Not afraid to air it out. And they had a 1,000-yard rusher and 1,100-yard rusher in Irving, over 1,100 yards on the year, 8 touchdowns. And then, of course, led by Mike Evans, a 1,000-yard receiver, 11 touchdowns. Jalen Daniels, what you can't say enough about this kid. 3,600 passing yards on the year, 25 touchdowns to 9 picks. Also, the team's leading rusher. He rushed for almost 900 yards and 6 touchdowns. But that reason alone is why I think Tampa Bay wins this game and wins it fairly convincingly. With the exception of Michael Vick, teams really haven't ever had just a ton of success when your quarterback is your leading rusher. And Daniels is a phenomenal talent. I mean, you throw for 3,600 yards and rush for 900 yards, you're doing something. Tampa's defense is good enough that they can disrupt things. And if they can disrupt Daniels, they're going to win. If they can't, Daniels could have a field day. It wouldn't surprise me if Washington won this game. I don't think they will. I think Tampa Bay wins this game. I think they win it by, I think it's a 2-possession game. I think they win by 9 points. I'd say, maybe 24-14, 23-14, something like that. I think Tampa does win this game. But I mean, I can't say enough about how impressed I've been with Washington this season. They've done great things. The interesting one, you have the Minnesota Vikings and the LA Rams. The LA Rams are supposed to host this game. I don't know if they're going to be able to. I mean, the situation right now in Los Angeles is unbelievably scary right now. I don't know if they're going to be able to host this game or not. They've already moved it to Monday. It's going to be a 7 p.m. game on ESPN and ABC. The Vikings are a 1-point favorite in this game. Minnesota's 14-3 and on the road. I think Minnesota wins this game massively. I think they're going to be really upset with how things went against Detroit last week. They're going to go into this game with a huge chip on their shoulder, with everything to prove, and they're playing a Rams team that are worried about things other than football at the moment. I think Minnesota's the better team no matter what. But you've got, put all the everything's into it, and this could get bad. The game is still set for SoFi Stadium. I don't know that it's going to happen there, though. I mean, unless they get these fires under control very, very quickly, I don't see them being able to host. For the Rams, you got Matthew Stafford, 3,800 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. You know what you get with him. I mean, Mr. Consistent. Um, Williams with 1,300 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns on the season. Good season for him. And you've got Puka Nacua, 990 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he missed a chunk of the season too with injury. I'm a Puka Nacua fan. I love watching him play the game. He's a good player. For Minnesota, you've got Sam Darnold, who had a lot of doubters coming into the season, but he's doing well for himself. 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns to 12 picks. You've got Aaron Jones, over 1,100 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. You've got Justin Jefferson, 1,500 yards, almost 1,600 yards, and 10 touchdowns on the year. I think Minnesota has too many weapons for the Rams to handle on a good day. And unless things change drastically, it's not going to be a good day for LA. I think Minnesota wins. I think they win big. I think it's one of those games that can be over by halftime, and then they kind of ease off the break because again, these guys are professionals. They don't want to the NFL is very much they don't want to kick you while you're down. The Sam Weiss, Jerry Glanville days are over. They don't do that anymore. But that's I think that Minnesota wins this game, and I think they do win it going away in my opinion. But that's it. That's the first episode of Sports Madness. We do want to thank all of you for joining us today on this podcast here in the Madhouse. I want to invite everybody to find us on Facebook, Sports Madness Network. Like us on there. We'll do kind of articles and polls and stuff on there. Again, we are building toward putting a website, Sports Madness website, where we will have shows and podcasts, hoping to syndicate some things as well, and then doing articles and other things on there as well. But we do want to thank all of you once again for joining us on this broadcast. Thank you so much, friends. Without you, none of this is possible. Until next time, just reminding you that there are good ships, wood ships, and ships that sail the seas, but the best ships are friendships, and may they always be. Until next time, take care and God bless.